Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Netanyahu will meet Donald Trump at the White House next Monday as the president suggests a Gaza ceasefire deal could be reached within a week. The Senate passes Trump's one big, beautiful bill after Vice President J.D. Vance casts the tie-breaking vote. The U.S. president visits Alligator Alcatraz, a migrant detention center in Florida surrounded by swamp-dwelling reptiles. And Al Hilal's historic win, the Saudi side glide through to the quarterfinals of the Club World Cup after knocking out Manchester City. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet US President Donald Trump in Washington next Monday. That's according to US officials. President Trump suggested a possible ceasefire in Gaza could be reached within a week. It comes as Israeli planes and tanks struck Gaza on Tuesday, destroying homes and forcing residents to evacuate. Local health authorities claim 20 people were killed in the latest attacks. We can now go live to Tel Aviv to speak to our correspondent there, Trent Murray. Trent, pleasure to have you on the show. So Trump will host Netanyahu on Monday after saying he could secure a ceasefire in Gaza within a week. What more do we know?
Good evening, Leigh-Ann. That's right. Prime Minister Netanyahu heading back to Washington, D.C. for the third time this year since President Trump returned to the White House. He spoke at a cabinet meeting earlier today where he appeared to show a big lineup of meetings he is planning, not just with the president at the White House, but also the vice president, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce, as well as a number of meetings, we're being told, on Capitol Hill with both leaders from the House and the Senate. Now, we know that there are a number of issues on the agenda. According to the readout here from the Prime Minister's office, both sides reportedly want to have an intelligence assessment over their operations in Iran following those strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. We are also being told potentially some sort of agreement between Israel and Syria is on the agenda. Of course, following the fall of Bashar al-Assad, some suggestion that maybe some sort of a peace agreement between Syria and Israel could be signed in order to reduce tensions on that border. But it is Gaza that we expect to really take centre stage, with signals coming from the US that there is an impatience growing in the White House over the ongoing war. We heard earlier on Sunday President Trump post on Truth Social that it is time to make a deal in Gaza and for Israel to get its hostages back. I think setting the scene potentially for what this meeting will focus on. We also know, of course, that sentiment of some sort of deal is one that is growing louder here, voices growing louder here in Israel after 20 months of war. Many of those families of the remaining living hostages are continuing to put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to come to some sort of ceasefire agreement in order to return their loved ones home.
And Trent, local health authorities say 20 people were killed in Israeli strikes on Tuesday, and that's following an attack on a Gazan cafe, which happened yesterday, of course, Monday. Can you give us the latest on that situation?
Well, residents in Gaza are saying that it has been another day of heavy activity with both Israeli tanks and planes bombarding large areas of the Gaza Strip. We have seen additional evacuation orders issued by the IDF as tanks have moved in to the east of Gaza City in the north, as well as in the south around Rafah and Khan Yunis. Now, what the Gaza Health Ministry is saying is that Israeli gunfire and military strikes in the besieged enclave have killed at least 112 people and wounded more than 400 in the past 24 hours. We've not had any immediate comment against those numbers from the IDF, but I think it is a signal that while the Prime Minister is preparing to travel to Washington to discuss a future ceasefire, the situation on the ground still does remain very dangerous for Palestinians being caught in the crossfire between Hamas and the IDF.
And finally, more than 170 charities have called for the shutdown of the Israeli and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This has been controversial. What more can you tell us about these calls?
So this is the American-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. They're using private American contractors to supply aid into Gaza, effectively sidestepping the existing UN channels. Now, we know that the UN has called this US-backed scheme inherently unsafe and a violation of humanitarian impartiality rules. Of course, since this scheme got up and running, we've seen reports of hundreds of Palestinians being killed in order to try and reach their aid. Now, the groups that are signing on to this letter, 170 of them out of Geneva, include Oxfam, Doctors Without Borders, Save the Children, the Norwegian Refugee Council, Amnesty International, a host of others. They have said in this joint statement that Palestinians in Gaza face an impossible choice: starve or risk being shot while trying desperately to reach food to feed their families. Now, the GHF has shot back in comments it's given to Reuters, saying that it's delivered more than 52 million meals in the 5 weeks it's been operating, while those other humanitarian groups I mentioned have nearly seen all of their aid looted. They go on to say that instead of bickering and throwing insults from the sidelines, we would welcome other humanitarian groups to join us and feed the people in Gaza. But despite that, I think we've seen some signs in the past 24 hours now that even the Israelis are acknowledging that this is not a perfect system and that there has indeed been problems. We've seen an update to the instructions that they've given to Israeli troops on the ground for managing the crowds visiting the GHF sites. They've erected signs showing where there are combat zones. They've brought in concrete statues to try and bring people in to where they are. And they say that they have lessons learned into why they are now updating their guidance in order to try and reduce people being shot as they're collecting their aid.
Trent Murray in Tel Aviv, thank you for joining us. Let's get into this further with Dr. Ahmed Al Farra, head of pediatrics at Nasser Hospital in Gaza. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. Thank you for joining me. So we just heard from our correspondent in Tel Aviv there. What's your reaction to the numerous charities and NGOs calling for the closure of the GHF?
Thank you for having me, my friend. About the distribution aids, it is a big failure and misleading for the world about that some aids are come inside Gaza, but actually this is a big trick. These aids are centers of trapping the Palestinian people, the young male and the adolescent boys. They are going every morning there because they are hungry, and unfortunately they come back as bodies. I saw a lot of them. I can't imagine that someone who's going there to feed his brothers and his mother or his father and come back killed after targeted in his eye or in his mouth by a good sniper who's dealing with them. This is the first. Second, this is unhumanitarian and immoral method to distribute food. I'm as a doctor, I will not send my my boy to go there. I will not go there because it is unhuman being to be dealt with that distribution way, because this is make the Palestinian people, sorry to talk about that, like animals. It is against moral, against humanity, against everything.
And what you said there is very difficult for us to hear. And of course, you are in Gaza, and many people are saying that people will either starve or risk dying when they go to these food aid sites. And can you just tell us, personally for you and for the people of Gaza, where are you getting food from? How are you keeping yourselves, hydrated with good nutrition? Is that actually possible?
My friend, this is harmful for us to express our feeling that starvation was used and thirsty was used as a weapon against the Palestinian people. And this happening in this modern and this in this century. My friend, I'm as a doctor, I'm taking my food. I still suffering from a lot of thirsty, a lot of hungry. We are suffering a lot about everything, about food, about milk, about what we need as a family. It's unbelievable to use this as a target against the Palestinian people. My friend, what is the Israeli government is doing is misleading for the world, misleading for the international community that it is come inside. And what come inside is a very little amount and doesn't answer the little or the minimum point of the critical demand for the Palestinian people. We are talking about closing the borders since nearly 4 months ago. You can imagine, my friend, that 2 million people are under complete obstruction and complete siege, either for everything. And when you start to get something inside Gaza, you just put by this way, and you select what you can get inside and not what they are demand. For example, the infant formula milk is not present nowadays. You can imagine, my friend, that in my NICU, neonatal ICU, I have nearly 20 premature babies without milk. I'm asking for the media. I started a campaign through the medias, through Arabiya, through every channel. Please, you have to save the life for these premature babies. What is the crime that they did to be punished by forbid or try to not allow the milk to get inside Gaza?
And you just spoke to me there about the baby formula. We've heard from you that supplies are running dry because of Israel's blockade and the difficulty of getting aid in. Are you seeing a lot of malnutrition in older children who are also visiting the hospital? And do you have any medical supplies left to actually treat those who need it?
My colleague, today I was taking my daily round on the patient on the malnutrition. I saw a case, her name is Amal Al-Bayyouk. Amal is nearly 7 years old. Her weight before starvation was 20 kilograms. You can imagine, my friend, please. Nowadays, her weight is just 10 kilograms. She lost 50% of her weight. She lost muscles, she lost fat tissue. She just have the bone covered by skin. She's in very serious and critical general condition. One of the extreme examples for malnutrition. I looked for the eyes for this girl. She was depressed. She was isolated. She can't talk. She can't talk or walk. You know, my colleague, I want to tell you something. I studied medicine since 25 years ago. When we studied about marasmus and the kwashiorkor and hypovitaminosis, we thought that it is theoretical disease. We will not see it in the modern world. We will not see these diseases in the new century. But nowadays, I swear to God, I watch and see every day a lot of aggressive and severe examples of this malnutrition. About the medical supplies, my colleague, we have a lot of lack of medical supplies. The gauze, the very simple gauze that we are using for wounds, for care, post-operation, intra-operation, after operation, Nasser Medical Complex have no piece of gauze. You can imagine we have meningitis today in our hospital. We have 40 cases of meningitis. We don't have the method or the analysis to know it is viral or bacterial. We don't have vancomycin and acyclovir, which they are essential drugs for treatment of that. We don't have places in the hospital. We put the patient on the ground, on a mattress on the ground because of fully occupied patient. We have malnutrition. If you ask me what is the cause of this meningitis to be in that number, this is a huge number of meningitis. Meningitis, by definition, it is a serious disease which is inflamed the CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, and the membrane around the membrane around the brain, and it is if not is treated possibly or early, it will be cause hearing damage, it would be cause vision damage, cerebral palsy, delayed in mental and motor milestones. It is unbelievable to be in this situation in this time.
Doctor, you describe such harrowing scenes, but I just want to ask you one further question. Netanyahu and Donald Trump are due to actually meet on Monday. There are suggestions a possible ceasefire deal could happen. If you could send a message to both of these leaders, what would you say to them right now?
My friend, my message is for President Donald Trump, please stand with the humanity and morality and side with the right of the Palestinian people to live, to learn, to travel. We are not ink on paper. We are created by God, and we have the right to live, to learn, to receive medical health, to travel outside, to move as the people all over the world. This is our right. Again, you have my president, Donald Trump, you have to catch the point for make a ceasefire and stop that war, because I'm afraid that we'll reach the point for begging for that, because I'm afraid that we will reach a critical point about something happening for these innocent people, that the history and the international law will judge everyone against what's happening in Gaza nowadays.
Dr. Ahmed Al Farra, Head of Pediatrics at Nasser Hospital in Gaza, I wish you all the luck and your family. Thank you for speaking to us once again. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Now, the US Senate has passed President Trump's one big, beautiful bill. The bill includes increased spending for border security, defense and energy, as well as deductions to healthcare and food support programs. It will now be returned to the lower house of representatives for a final vote before being sent, of course, to Donald Trump to be signed. Let's get the views of Republican strategist Adolfo Franco. Adolfo, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Okay, it's been 24 hours of debate. It's been touch and go. No one knew what was going to happen. But what's your reaction to the US Senate passing the big, beautiful bill, but it just squeaked through?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's sobering to come on after the report you just presented, so it all seems relative in terms of importance. But the first thing I would say about this bill is this was expected to pass, and it's just too big to fail. And when I say too big to fail, the same thing will happen in the House. Without this passing, this is the president's signature bill. It fulfills his promise to eliminate taxes on overtime and on tips, and of course extends the vitally important tax cuts that President Trump makes them permanent, enacted in 2017. Without that, every single American would have a tax increase. So it's just too big to fail, but it's difficult to pass legislation with the slim margins in both the House and the Senate, because there are, as we saw during this debate, and you lost 3 Republicans on this, parochial state issues and particular issues that are important to each senator. So it became a very difficult task for Leader Thune to come to this point. But it was never in doubt that it would pass. And frankly, I will advance to you now, and love to have to come back on the show if I'm wrong, that it will pass the House of Representatives. The version of it will be different. What's passed in the Senate, as you noted, now needs to go back to the House, and then the House can make changes to the Senate bill, and then this has to be reconciled in a conference committee and then go back. So a lot of work to be done, especially if we're trying to meet the July 4th deadline that President Trump has as his desired day to sign legislation.
As you say there, a lot of work to be done. You did say to me that you're pretty confident this was going to pass. It wasn't easy for the Republican Party. You mentioned it goes back to the House of Representatives. It's going to face another tough battle there. And I just want you to clarify for me if you think this will be through by the 4th of July, or is there going to be further delays? I think that is now the question that many people are asking.
I think there's a good chance it's July 4th, and that's because the House rules are completely different than the Senate rules. In the simplest terms for the viewers, the House is just the simple majority decides everything. The Senate, every senator has prerogatives, and as we saw, why there was a vote-a-rama, why there was a delay, is the minority has a lot of rights that do not exist in the House. So the House calendar can be expedited, which is an excellent question. There's only a 3-vote majority in the House. So you have 221 Republicans, and you can only afford to lose 3. Last time it only passed by 1 vote. But I go back to what the Speaker said today after the Senate bill passed. We just have to get this done. And the reason is the following. If it's not passed, if I'm wrong, and this legislation does not advance, it hasn't been changed substantially. If it does not advance to the president, then the entire Republican establishment and the president will lose significantly political support among Republicans and among the American people. So that's why I say this. Now, we can get into a lot of the specifics. There are a lot of thorny issues that have to do with local taxes in the states, have to do with Medicaid cuts, as you made reference to, have to do with rural hospitals. So a lot of legitimate debate, but ultimately something President Trump said. Many of you are going to just have to swallow this and vote for it. And keep in mind, this is not unlike legislation the Democrats have passed with Obamacare and other significant bills in the past that have passed by 1 or 2 votes. So when it's something of this magnitude, it is difficult to get 535 people in Congress to agree to anything, much less a 1,000-page complex tax package.
But like you said, Donald Trump has campaigned on many things that are core to this bill, so it's vital the Republicans do get it through. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Elon Musk. He says every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest increase in history should hang their heads in shame. Adolfo, does he have a point? This bill is going to be increasing US debt significantly. It's also going to be taking away almost $700 billion from Medicaid, $260 billion of SNAP benefits. And like what Musk is saying, it's just going to add to the national debt.
Well, he's right and he's wrong. And let me address it this way. The bill actually contains the largest cut, $1.2 trillion, that Congress has ever enacted on current spending, number one. But you're right, it adds to the debt. But it adds to the debt based on something called scoring, and that is projections in the future. The idea is in 2017, when the initial tax cuts were, which are being extended now, were approved, the Congressional Budget Office also projected significant deficits that never materialized because the economy grew. So the banking the Republicans are having is that the actual debt will not be that, because there will be significant economic growth and tax revenues will actually increase because of more economic activity in the country. That's sort of the philosophical debate. But back to the cuts, many of these so-called cuts on Medicaid and the SNAP program and other things have to do with either work requirements, eligibility, questions about whether people should be on these programs at all. Most eligible, if I would say all, eligible Americans will continue to receive those benefits. But to Mr. Musk's point, there was a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, and this is designed to do that. Now, in simple terms, he's right. When you look at the actual numbers, he campaigned on, as you remember, trying to find $2 trillion in cuts and only achieved about 10% of that. So the will to cut is always very, very difficult in Congress. So he has a point in that regard. But the problem is, and you just articulated in your excellent question, most of the cuts can only be had in the entitlement programs in our country. 60% of the budget are the social services that are provided. And there's just not the political will to do so. So the banking is cutting taxes will stimulate the economy and offset the projected deficits by more tax revenue coming in as a consequence of enhanced economic activity.
I could speak to you about this for well over an hour because it is a philosophical debate. It's a fascinating debate that's happening over in the US. It's completely gripping many of us, but we're out of time. Republican strategist Adolfo Franco,
thank you so much.
Thank you for your thoughts. Now, President Trump has attended the official opening of Alligator Alcatraz today, a migrant detention center built on a Florida swamp. The new facility, located on an abandoned airfield in the Everglades National Park, is home to around 200,000 alligators, which can grow up to 15 feet long. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced the new site would cost an estimated $450 million. Earlier, Trump told reporters immigrants held there will have to learn how to dodge the alligators if they try to escape. Take a listen.
I guess that's the concept. This is not a nice business. I guess that's the concept. If the snakes are fast, but alligators, we're going to teach them how to run away from an alligator, okay? If they escape prison, how to run away. Don't run in a straight line. Run like this. And you know what? Your chances go up about 1%, okay? Not a good thing.
We can now speak to former NYPD lieutenant and criminal justice expert, Dr. Darrin Porcher. So before we get into the interview, just a quick reaction there to what Donald Trump had to say. He said, snakes are fast. He's obviously going to teach people how to run away from crocodiles. What do you make of his thoughts there?
I think President Trump is speaking to a level of hyperbole, and we need to focus on the germane component of how can we effectively maintain or house detainees without them being harmed by the animals in the surrounding area. And that's something that we would need the Bureau of Prisons to conduct an analysis on, coupled with OSHA, to ensure that this is a safe facility, because this was erected relatively quickly. I think it was like 10 to 11 days. So it begs the question as to how safe is this detainment process?
Yeah, absolutely. But Dr. Porcher, the mastermind behind Alligator Alcatraz is the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Can you tell us why the runway in the middle of the Everglades is becoming a temporary detention center?
You know, that's the million-dollar question, because when we speak to the deforestation in the Everglades, we have constant construction, which is reducing that national park being the Everglades. So these animals have a right to an existence in their home. And now we're removing that based on instilling a detention facility. So although this is something that Governor DeSantis introduced, I really think that this is not a good position. And I think this is more so driven towards Governor DeSantis gaining press on a national level for whatever his potential run would be after his governorship, because he's going to be term limited out because this is his second term, and it begs the question as to what his next move would be. So I think he's using this as somewhat of a clickbait to gain the notoriety.
So there are only 7,000 ICE agents who currently carry out arrests and deportations. So does this administration need more personnel, resources and detention centres? And is this why we're seeing them go to places like the Everglades?
Well, the federal detention facilities, as it relates to the migrants, have been maxed out. So they need to be afforded a greater level of infrastructure. So the building of additional beds is something that had to happen. But it goes back as to why are we doing this in the Everglades when we have a lot of infrastructure bodies in the United States that could be used. And I think this is something that is more of a deterrence coupled with a statement politically against the unlawful migration than anything else.
And it's interesting because the US administration, the Trump administration, would say because it's cheap, because they don't have to build parameters, people aren't going to try to escape something like that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the quick action from the Trump administration. It's really panicked environmentalists, as you did mention there. The Everglades ecosystem is essentially very fragile. They have filed a lawsuit. They're demonstrating. They're trying to make a big case of opposition to this. But do you think in reality this will make any difference whatsoever?
Unfortunately, I don't think the lawsuit that's going to be introduced from the perspective of the deforestation is going to be something that comes to fruition and ends this facility that's being constructed. You have to look at, if you look at this just in black and white, these are actual tents. These are not cement structures. These are not freestanding permanent structures. They look to be temporary structures. So when I look at how this is going to be effectively managed, it begs the question as to, was this a shotgun reaction on the part of the administration, or is this something they're looking to do long term? Based on the infrastructure that's been established, it doesn't appear to be a long-term detention facility, but at the same token, under Donald Trump's watch, nobody knows what's going to happen, because I find on many instances, he makes decisions that are not necessarily the most prudent for the situation at hand.
And Darren, before I let you go, Trump described the Democrats' New York City mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani, as a total nut job and a communist. You were a former NYPD lieutenant. Is this an accurate assessment of Mamdani?
Well, when we look to the climate of politics, not just in New York, but on a national level, it's been highly polarized between the Democrats and the Republicans. The one thing that Mamdani has introduced is he's introduced a series of things that he just doesn't have the ability to do, such as free buses, a tax increase, because these are things that come from another aspect of government in the state of New York. But in terms of labeling someone as a nut job, a lunatic, I just think that that's unprofessional, and we need to gear towards a professional agreement, a professional arena where we can engage in a discourse and come up with solutions as opposed to cheap shots that you see the president taking.
Dr. Darrin Porcher, criminal justice expert, thank you so much for talking to us about Alligator Alcatraz. A pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Leigh-Ann.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Tesla sales dropped around 64% in Sweden and nearly 62% in Denmark in June, continuing a 6-month decline. In contrast, Norway saw a 54% year-on-year rise in registrations, with Model Y sales up. Analysts claim product updates, logistics and shifting consumer sentiment are to blame. Renault will record an $11 billion one-off loss on its Nissan stake in H1, marking a major step back for the decades-old alliance. The write-down reflects Nissan's weak performance amid slumping sales and EV struggles. Despite loss, Renault still expects to meet its goals and will keep working with Nissan. Turning to the sports news now, Kylian Mbappe is set to make his Club World Cup debut as Real Madrid face Juventus in the last 16 on Tuesday at the Hard Rock Stadium. The coach confirmed Mbappe's likely return after illness, joining a squad boosted by Carvajal and Militao. And Carlos Alcaraz battled past Fabio Fognini in 4 hours on Wimbledon's hottest ever opening day, narrowly advancing despite struggling in the heat. He'll now face a British qualifier, Oliver Trafford, in the second round. Meanwhile, on court today, Heather Watson, the Brit, she's out. She got knocked out after facing Carla Torsten, whilst world number one Yannick Sinner, British number one Jack Draper and Novak Djokovic have all been kicking off their campaigns on the second day. It's been dubbed the match of the season. On Monday night, Saudi Arabia side Al Hilal shot to victory in the Club World Cup with a 4-3 win over Manchester City in Orlando, knocking Pep Guardiola's side out of the tournament. Al Hilal now progresses to the quarter-finals. And sports journalist Joe Morrison joins me in the studio to tell me all about it. Back for a second day.
Hello, Leigh-Ann.
Hello, nice to see you again.
Mashallah.
Yeah, we're not talking tennis today, we're talking football. Was this result expected, considering they went a goal down initially? It was the last goal was in injury time, extra time. I don't know, you tell me.
Before we begin,
act like I'm gonna know.
Do you like my halal blue?
I like your halal blue.
The royal blue.
The royal blue.
To answer your question, simply, definitely not. No one expected Hilal to beat Manchester City, except obviously the hardcore Hilal fans. Pundits didn't, players didn't. It was momentous, Leigh-Ann, and I consider the match, as I'm saying last night, it was the early hours of this morning, I consider it in the same category as when Saudi Arabia beat Argentina in the World Cup in Qatar. That's how momentous it is.
But some people are saying, like, this is the match of the whole season to date. But who was the standout performer to you in the whole? Because I know lots of people, I went online to look at what was going on, and it's the goalkeeper was getting a lot of praise. But for you, who else?
Yassine Bono. Because I know that Marcus Leonardo, he got the goals, the strikers always get the glory, don't they? He got the actual official man of the match, and they get a little trophy. But for me, Yassine Bono, he pulled off, 6-8 stupendous saves in the first half. It is his
job, though, to save goals.
I think he's carried them to the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
He carried Morocco to the semi-finals of the World Cup. He's carried Hilal to the quarterfinals. He was that important, especially the first half.
So I just wanted to know, how does the Saudi League now compare to the biggest leagues globally? Because I'm hearing people saying it's better than MLS, the American League. Has this put Saudi in a different tier, in a different spotlight now?
Without a doubt. I mean, better than the MLS, absolutely, which is obviously the American League for those watching who may not know. But it's certainly made a lot of people sit up and take notice. Is it better than the Premier League, for example, or La Liga? No, not quite, not yet. Ronaldo has said it's up there, it's in the top 5 leagues in the world. And I don't think Ronaldo's far away with that comment.
Yeah, he did make that comment, and that's where I did pick it up from, so a little bit of research. But before I let you go, so right now, I don't really know how this all works. It's not my sport of choice. So they are through the qualifying stages, essentially.
Through the group.
Through the group.
Last 16 was the game in the early hours of this morning. We're now into quarterfinals.
So talk to me about quarterfinals. Who do they face next? And do you think they'll win that one?
So quarterfinals, they're up against Fluminense. I think they beat Fluminense, the Brazilian side. Then I think they're on the easier side of the draw, because you've got to remember the draw splits in two, and the tougher teams, your Paris Saint-Germain's, your Bayern Munich's, Real Madrid, Juventus that you mentioned earlier on play tonight. They are all on the other side. So I think that they have a better run to the final if they can get past Fluminense, because then it would be Chelsea or Palmeiras in the other semi-finals. So whoever comes through that would be their opponent.
And how's Chelsea been playing this last
season?
season?
They've done well.
Right.
I mean, obviously they had that ridiculous game where there was the big stoppage. You know, they had, what was it, 4 minutes left to play, and they stopped the game because of thunderstorms? That's like tennis, Leigh-Ann.
Oh, no, come on. In tennis now, we've got a roof. We've got a roof over Wimbledon.
That's
but there was crazy weather in the States while this cup was on. Am I correct in saying that?
It's been ridiculously hot. And
yeah.
I think there's some people in FIFA have short memories. The 94 World Cup, hot, humid, and I think they're going to have to look at that for the World Cup itself, the actual World Cup next year.
But this is exciting, right? We've got to really get behind Al Hilal. We don't know what's to come, but they could go all the way.
They could go all the way. And why not? Yalla Shabab.
There we are. You heard it here first. Joe Morrison, thank you so much for joining me again. Yeah, Joe Morrison there. A reminder of our top stories. Netanyahu will meet Donald Trump at the White House next Monday as the president suggests a Gaza ceasefire deal could be reached within a week. The Senate passed Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill after Vice President J.D. Vance cast a tie-breaking vote. Meanwhile, the U.S. president visits Alligator Alcatraz, the migrant detention center in Florida surrounded by swamp-dwelling reptiles. And Al Hilal's historic win, the Saudi side glide through to the quarterfinals of the Club World Cup after knocking out Manchester City. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. We'll be you back in a couple of hours' time with W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.